Well, behind me, I am delighted to introduce to you this focus project within the 10th Asia Pacific Triennial of Contemporary Art, APT 10, Between Earth and Sky, Indigenous Contemporary Art from Taiwan. This is a very special exhibition bringing together the work of 8 artists from Taiwanese Indigenous peoples, and we're working in a whole range of media, from painting to sculpture to performance to installation. And I'm looking forward to introducing it to you now. Oh, this extraordinary work is part weaving, part sculpture, part installation by Aluaiy Kaumakan, who is a Taiwan woman from Sandaman. The technique that she's used here is one of creating long strands into ropes, which are often wound into little coils, which assemble together to create these extraordinary shapes. Well, here we have 2 really intriguing paintings by Anli Genu, who is, in addition to being a full-time artist, a full-time pastor as well. His work is a way of balancing his customary Atayal beliefs with his Christian faith. These works are quite beautiful illustrations of Atayal traditions. The work that I'm standing in front of is called Music of Hunters, and it depicts the dances that would take place following hunts. This is the second work by Anli Genu. It's called Weave My Face. This work is a real tribute to the tradition of tattooing, which is something that unfortunately has been lost to a large degree from Atayal culture. These facial tattoos for Anli Genu are a part of the Atayal culture that is deeply imprinted on their spirits. These little individual pictures that make up the overall composition, like photographs on a wall, the quite extraordinary texture of the paint that he's used, as well as the mixed media. You can see some details such as shells, for instance, which have been used in some of the headdresses. These beautifully coloured works are by Etan Pavavalung, one of the co-curators of the exhibition. The work behind me is called Children of the Land and Sun, and it recounts creation stories that were told to the artist by his grandmother when he was young. In a very beautiful quote, he recalls the stories that his grandmother told him being sometimes scary, sometimes funny, but sometimes repetitive. But as he grew older, he became aware of their deep significance. These panels are illustrations like those of a children's book that narrate the stories, using a beautiful technique of carving and painting directly on the wood. Well, these 6 panels make up one work by Etan. It's called The Wind Blows Between Heaven and Earth, and it's quite majestic. This is an excellent example of Etan's trace, carve, layer, paint method. This is a method of laying down inks on the wood, carving directly into the surface, and painting details to remarkable effect. The lines that you can see here have this quite shimmering effect when viewed from the side or moving past them. You get a real sense of the depth of the work. Depicted in it are the lilies, the eye totem, and these circular forms that represent the stars. There's a very strong relationship between the lilies and the stars, as if the lilies are stars that have descended to Earth. The line work, which is one of the most striking aspects of these works, is intended to evoke the immaterial, the wind and the sun, as well as the interconnectedness of all things. This really arresting installation is by Masiswagger Zingrur. Zingrur has been devoting himself to the art of ancient Taiwan pottery for over 20 years. The pots are one of the 3 great treasures of Taiwan culture, and his devotion to them has ranged from recreating these forms to introducing them in the form of contemporary installations. There's an equivalence here. He doesn't see any great difference between a traditional art form and a contemporary art form. For Zingrur, they're both contemporary. This work is titled The Spiral of Life, Tongue of the Cloth, A Mutual Dialogue by Yuma Taru. Yuma Taru has been extremely important for the documentation and maintenance of Atayal textile traditions. She and a number of the women that she's worked with have documented garments and designs from throughout Atayal communities to really bring these textile traditions and techniques into the present. Doing more than that, she creates these beautiful installations as well, like the work behind me. This is a work that takes fibre weavings and turns them into quite lyrical structures. You can see the different lines and forms as they move about with a certain lightness overhead. Apart from its beautiful colours and its delicacy and its vibrancy, the work also refers to Atayal oral traditions. There is no written language. Knowledge and stories are passed down through speech and through song, through ballads. This work in particular represents the form of the duet, of the need to create a relationship between a speaker and a listener, something that you can't do quite as immediately on the written page. It's a tribute then not just to forms of weaving, but to forms of speech. Dondon Hounwn is a Turuku artist who has done many things. He's an inheritor of tribal ballads, songs and rituals, as well as an artist working in performance, video, installation and environmental theatre. The works behind me are part of a series of works whose titles all begin with M. In Turuku language, the M going before a word symbolises something happening in the present. These videos document his quite shamanic performances in these bamboo and woven structures that resemble traditional workers' huts. The works in this showing concern the tensions that can be encountered when rituals encounter a change of religion or belief, the emptiness of tattooing without ritual in the modern world, as well as the journey of Taiwan's non-scheduled tribes towards official recognition. This work is by Fangas Nayaw. Fangas is a choreographer and playwright who has worked in a number of very innovative ways to introduce Amis modes of socialization as well as critical issues to a broader public. He's worked in such innovative media as virtual reality, as well as within traditional museum spaces. This work takes a kind of a theatrical production and turns it into a video installation. It's a work of Indigenous futurism with quite an extraordinary aesthetic. The work concerns a possible future in which Indigenous people have disappeared from the earth. The question then becomes, what's left to examine the cultural forms, the rituals, the dances, and other manifestations of these people, as well as the question of what becomes of the earth when we no longer care for it, when we no longer care for the environment. It's a very compelling piece with a beautiful soundtrack that runs throughout the installation. Well, we have two works that we've specially commissioned for this exhibition. One of them is Yuma Taru's beautiful fibre installation. The other is this work by Ruby Swana, very magical piece called Dancer of Light. Ruby is an Amis artist who has been quite central to the development of sculpture, working with found materials to create often quite romantic and evocative pieces. The work that you see behind me is inspired by the story of Tiama-chan, who was a young woman who glowed so brightly that the god of the sea fell in love with her. he caused a flood. And in order to prevent any further floods, she decided to join him. The light that you see in the water on the waves is her glow, according to Ruby, her desire to be reunited with her family. The work is created in quite an evocative, magical way to create this almost sort of underwater space, using very simple, everyday materials, many of which are pre-existing: fishnet, chicken wire, light bulbs, and foil, to create this quite seductive impression and this very, very beautiful display of light. Thank you for joining me on this virtual tour of Between Earth and Sky. It's been a real pleasure to take you around some quite exciting artworks, I think you'll agree. I really do hope that you're able to join us here before too long, but I do know that the audience here is going to love these works and these artists. So thank you very much.